Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Herbst. I am president of American Jewish University in Los Angeles. I'd like to welcome you to this special event in our ongoing online programming series called Bayachad Together, spirited by AJU. Today it's a pleasure to be in
We
conversation
don't know what time or day it is anymore.
It's a pleasure to be in conversation with columnist and noted author Barry Weiss, talking about Jewish responsibilities in a time of plague. American Jewish University seeks to advance and elevate the Jewish journey for individuals, organizations, and the community. We seek to deepen Jewish understanding for everyone, irrespective of background, affiliation, or future expectations. American Jewish University has a renowned seminary that trains rabbis. We prepare nonprofit managers to serve the community, and we train Jewish educators who have a profound influence on the next generation. We also have a wide variety of experiential programs that influence thousands and thousands of people. Our beloved summer camp, Camp Alanim, welcomes hundreds and hundreds of young people each year for an immersive Jewish experience. Our Ziering Brandeis Collegiate Institute is an immersive experience for young adults, while our Wizen Center for Continuing Education provides classes and programming for thousands of people in the Los Angeles area. Our Miller Introduction to Judaism program is a pathway for greater understanding of Judaism for non-Jews and Jews alike, and is the largest pathway to conversion in the United States. And our newly founded Maas Center for Jewish Journeys will provide a suite of experiential programs for people at all stages of their exploration of Judaism. Our new online programming series, Bayachad Together, spirited by AJU, demonstrates the reach and ambitions of the university. In just a few short days, we have put together a dynamic series of programs that we hope will educate and entertain you during the crisis. Look forward to many more events from us. Today, as I mentioned, I'll be in discussion with Barry Weiss, but before I start, I'd just like to say again, thank you so very much for participating with us. Please follow us on social media on the hashtag AJUTogether, and please look for future programming from our series Bayachad Together, spirited by AJU. Barry Weiss is an op-ed columnist and staff editor for the New York Times and author of the best-selling book, How to Fight Antisemitism, which has garnered numerous praise book awards. Her commentary on society, on the Jewish community, is widely read and widely commented upon. And I commend to you her column in today's New York Times on health workers at the front lines of fighting the virus. We'll be delighted to welcome Barry in person to AJU on November 12th. But that seems very far away. But so delighted that we were able to, in a very short amount of time, organize this online webinar. Barry, how are you? And I hope you and your family are healthy and safe.
Thank God we're okay dealing with this like every other person in the country. And I'm just so excited that there's like almost 600 participants, and I see wonderful people that I know already writing in, like Terry, who went to Alderdice with my parents, and Jonathan Birkin, another Pittsburgher. So thank you guys for tuning in, and forgive me, I'm a little technologically challenged. So hopefully this will work out okay.
Barry, we're also just grateful for you. I know there's a whole lot of demands on you. So we'll do about 20 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll have time for the audience to ask questions, which I'll read and ask Barry.
That sounds great.
So Barry, how does your understanding of Judaism inform your actions during this time of crisis?
Well, First of all, I think this has been a disorienting and really humbling moment for every person, Jew, non-Jew. One thing that I just keep finding myself thinking about is like what humanity has endured, right? Like things are abstract. You read about the Black Death or the Spanish flu, and it's an abstraction. And now we're getting kind of the tiniest taste of what it was like to live through incredible precariousness and uncertainty, and to live through it in those times without any understanding of modern science or medicine. So as uncertain as, and as precarious as things feel to us, just imagine living through an age where there was no understanding about vaccinations or disease or things like that. So I don't know about other people, but I'm just really sort of, my breath is taken away when I think about that. One thing that I think Judaism has to offer, and there are many things, but one thing I've been thinking a lot about is that we are a people of memory. And memory, especially in a moment like this, his deep historical memory can be very comforting and calming. When I was talking, I worked on a story a week ago about the Persian Jewish community in Great Neck, and how because of their unique, like many Jewish communities, but especially in one like the Persian Jewish community of Great Neck, there's incredible social cohesion. One person I talked to told me, you know, a small wedding in Great Neck is a wedding with 400 people. And the fears that the special nature of the Jewish community will make us in, like the thing that is the best about us, our deep connection and social cohesion, in this case makes us vulnerable. And I was talking to a rabbi and I said, is there anything that you remember that's like this? Thinking he would say something like 9/11 or Hurricane Sandy. But instead he went back to the 1300s. And he talked about how, you know, in the 1300s with the Black Death, Jews, of course, people will know on this call, I'm sure, Jews were blamed for spreading that plague because they were actually less susceptible to the virus for all kinds of reasons. They were ghettoized, and also because of practices like washing the hands before eating and mikvah before Shabbat. But rather than the surrounding community looking to the Jews and saying, how do we protect ourselves? Instead, the Jews were blamed for the plague. And, you know, there were 60 communities throughout Europe that were almost wiped out because of this. It was a blood libel. Now, he said to me in kind of dark moment, we've got it better than them. And indeed, you know, when we look back to that, I think that's true. And then there's, you know, even much more recently than the 1300s, the fact that our grandparents' generation survived the unimaginable. And so I think that that kind of historical memory can serve us very, very well in a moment of uncertainty. We've had the privilege, those of us who are born into sort of post-war America, to live in what I've referred to in my book as a holiday from history. You know, we have lived in a time of unbelievable privilege, if I can use that word. And now in a lot of ways, not just, you know, with the rise of anti-Semitism, we're returning to the mean of Jewish history, but in something like this, we're returning to history as well. And I think looking back to history is something that can bring an incredible amount of perspective and comfort in this moment.
Barry, are there particular texts or teachings that have helped you understand or get through this moment?
Well, sure. I mean, the fundamental teaching of choosing life. That is what Judaism is all about, choosing life. And that is a more important value than, you know, Shabbat and all of the rest. So putting that at the forefront of everything, I think, lets everything else fall into place. I was struck, Rabbi David Wolpe from your great state recommended to me that I should read about the example of the founder of the Musar movement, this guy Yisrael Salanter. And he was this guy that founded the Musar movement. He was a 19th century Talmudic genius. And he found himself living in Vilna in 1848 when the cholera epidemic was sweeping the globe, taking lives on a scale that would be totally unimaginable to us. And there's this wonderful article in My Jewish Learning by Rabbi Elisha Friedman that I'd recommend to people, where I learned a lot about him. And Salanter had this just overwhelmingly activist response. He focused on doing anything he could to save lives. He enlisted his yeshiva students to do that. He rented a building that he turned into a 1,500 bed hospital, and he raised lots of funds to care for the ill. But the most controversial thing he did, and it was very controversial inside the Vilna Jewish community, is that he advocating breaking Jewish law, not just Shabbat and not just kashrut, but also he publicly ate on Yom Kippur and he like did a kiddush in front of the synagogue, is because he wanted to explain to people that the value of elevating life and choosing life and saving life was more important than anything. Another Jewish value I think a lot about these days is the idea of the sort of the line in Breshit, right? Lo tov hiyod adam levado. It's not good for a person to be alone. And I think I was astonished and moved by the decision of these 14 major Sephardic Orthodox rabbis in Israel who ruled that it's okay to use Zoom and FaceTime and other Skype video conferences during Passover, specifically for the purpose of including older or higher risk people that can't go out. And this was part of their ruling. Just as it is permissible for a non-critical patient to receive treatment on Shabbat in order to cure him of illness, such is the case here. And I think what the rabbis are sort of saying implicitly here is acknowledging that loneliness is quite literally a threat to human beings' health and well-being. And I think Judaism has tremendous response to looking out for the lonely and the marginalized and the left behind. And I hope that our community can serve as an example in this moment. The last thing I'll say on this is I'm in a house where there's the Joseph Telushkin book called Jewish Wisdom. It's sort of a compendium of Jewish teaching. And last night we read this section that's called Either Friends or Death. And it's a phrase from the Talmud that the rabbis associated with this scholar, I think his name is Choni or Choni, I don't know how to pronounce it, Choni, I'm imagining, who woke up from a 70-year sleep after he'd eaten from this carob tree to discover that he had no peers and no friends. And he asked God in that moment to end his misery. He prayed for mercy and he died. And what is the lesson from that? That living without community, living without friends or family or people around you, the only thing that it's like death. And we need to think very hard about how to use this incredible technology that we're using now in a way to connect us, because the fact that we're not able to do the things that we build, that our civilization is built around, which is gathering together physically, we need to find creative solutions to it. And I think this is an example of one of them.
Barry, we have a set of obligations as neighbors, as Americans. Do you think Judaism informs us about a different or set of responsibilities in addition or supplemental?
Well, I think that this is one of those times when caring for everyone else, caring for our neighbors, is quite literally caring for ourselves too. Like this whole distinction, there's a time and a place for debating particularism and universalism within Judaism. It's an interesting debate. I love having it. I frankly don't feel like this is a moment for it. This is something that's touching everyone, Jews and non-Jews. And yeah, I just think that looking out for your neighbor is quite literally in this moment looking out for your own health, because the point about herd immunity and herd in general is that we can all be affected by it. I think there's a particular question that I've been thinking about in terms of, I take my role as someone who's a very public Jew, let's say, quite seriously. And I try and really pick my battles about when to criticize our community. But I did that 2 weeks ago when I noticed that different groups within the Haredi broader community in Brooklyn were still holding enormous weddings, despite the fact that we were already being told to sort of shelter in place and not gather in groups of more than 10, let alone hundreds of people. And a bunch of people called me out. They were angry, saying that I had, put a target on the back of our community. Never mind the fact that the reason that I knew about this is that people that I'm friends with within the Haredi community were sending me videos and pictures and texts from their sick beds where they were with 104 fevers already, begging me to use my platform to sort of call this out for the sake, not just of saving the lives of those people, but also the broader Brooklyn and New York and obviously the larger American community. So that's something that I've been thinking a lot about. And then you see, a few days later, there was a horrible instance of anti-Semitism where someone, I believe in upstate New York, was denied. They went to like an auto mechanic and they were denied service because the guy said, "You're spreading the disease." And then you think to yourself, I think to myself, did I contribute to this? But I just really think that the value of pikuach nefesh and saving lives and urging people to do the right thing, even if it requires a little bit of, calling people out publicly, I think is really important in this moment.
For those who have just joined us, I'm Jeffrey Herbst, president of American Jewish University, in conversation with noted author and columnist Barry Weiss, talking about Jewish responsibilities in a time of plague. Barry, you published an op-ed column this morning, very moving column on the heroic actions of health workers at the front line of the crisis. Do you want to talk about that, what you learned from that column while writing it?
Yeah, I mean, it was very moving to write. I've been following, I'm not an expert on healthcare or public health, but like everyone else, I've been following this story incredibly closely. And I've been following the hashtag MedTwitter. And so I've been reading the stories of doctors who are, they say we're not at the front lines, we're the last line. The public is the front line of this by staying home. They're the line of last resort, as one doctor told me. And I noticed that there were doctors who were talking about updating their wills. There were doctors who were talking about, no longer breastfeeding their infant because they don't want to breathe on the child. And so they were pumping their breast milk and having the in-laws feed their child. Then there were just story after story of doctors who are, as one doctor in Atlanta, this amazing woman, Michelle Au, put it to me, Chinese American doctor. She talked to me about basically feeling like she's not a doctor in a hospital, but an engineer in Chernobyl, and feeling like her entire person is radioactive, and the kind of unbelievable steps that they have to go through in order to keep their family safe from this. I think in the coming weeks, we're going to be seeing a lot more of doctors just not living at home anymore, as some already have moved into Airbnbs. The Four Seasons in New York is making the hotel available to doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers. Columbia University is turning over now empty dorms to healthcare workers. So I just think that there's no amount of thank you that we can give to these people, because they're doing this, and what the scandal is they're having to treat people without sufficient equipment. Almost every doctor I talked to, and some of them didn't want to put this on the record because they don't want to get in trouble in their hospitals, but they're having to recycle very, very basic equipment, and we're not even near the peak of this crisis. So it's called Doctors Are Writing Their Wills, for people that want to look it up.
And it's in today's New York Times. Looking at the chat function, several people have asked if this conversation is being recorded, and it will be available for the public later. Barry, what's your greatest fear about the moment? Obviously, there's enormous concern about mortality, so many people getting sick. But looking forward, what do you fear the most about this moment?
Well, I want to first maybe talk about what I fear inside the Jewish community, and then more broad fears. I think for inside the Jewish community, there's a worst case and a best case. And I think the worst case is that it makes people turn more insular, turn inward, caring only about themselves and their own families, especially as they look at their 401ks and their portfolios and they pull back their giving. I think that's kind of the worst case, is that it leads to kind of like a feeling of scarcity and hoarding, which makes sense. But I think that would be a terrible outcome. I think the best case is that and this is what I'm hopeful for, is that this brings clarity and reprioritizes things, including inside our own community. People should be asking themselves, what is more important? Is it more important to have a fancy fundraising dinner with, spending tens of thousands of dollars on flowers? Or is it more important that we create a safety net for people who, for example, work to take care of our grandparents in Jewish nursing home and assisted living home, who are now unemployed and collecting unemployment? What is a more important Jewish value? One of the reasons that Judaism has survived, frankly, is that we haven't had the luxury historically of caring about and indulging stupid things. And we have had, I think, the luxury of indulging some things that just frankly should not be a priority. And I hope that this moment is clarifying for our community about what really matters. And I think that maybe we'll see that especially so in the realm of giving and what we're giving to and what ultimately really matters. And I hope that this brings clarity to that. What do I fear in terms of the world, the country? I fear the same as other people. Obviously, I fear the disease and the mortality of the disease, and I feel like there's a lot we don't know about it. I fear that it will exacerbate the polarization that has already existed, and that it will, just lead to a kind of social breakdown. That really scares me. I would say more than anything else. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that in the same way that this can be clarifying for the Jewish community, that it can be clarifying in the broader community. One of the reasons I wanted to do the story that I wrote today is just there's unbelievable heroism in this country at this moment. And I think the more we can do to elevate the heroes and look to them and ask them, like, right, you look at this doctor who's putting herself and her family in danger to help us. And think to yourself, when you look at that, what am I doing? Am I doing everything in my power possibly to help? And I think that if we're doing that, it's really, really good. And there's one story that I wanted to leave people with, maybe before we go to questions. When I think about what is Jewish responsibility in this moment, and there's this Talmudic story, it's 3 lines, I'll read it to you. It happened that one of Rabbi Akiva's students became sick, but none of the sages went to visit him. Rabbi Akiva, however, went to visit him. Because he swept and cleaned the floor for his student, the student recovered. And the student said to him, "Rabbi, you have given me life." Rabbi Akiva came out and taught, those who do not visit a sick person might just have spilled his blood. And right now, obviously, we can't physically go yet to go and visit people who are sick, but we need to be thinking about every possible thing we are doing to help those people around us who are suffering more than we are.
Barry, that's a beautiful teaching and a wonderful segue to the questions and answers. Again, I'm Jeffrey Herbst, president of American Jewish University. I'm in conversation with noted author and columnist Barry Weiss as part of our B'Yachad Together, spirited by AJU online programming series that we've developed in response to the crisis. Please send me your questions using the Q&A function. I'll ask, of course, for your understanding. Not only this is new technology for all of us, but I'm trying to look at several different screens at once. One question is, you mentioned in your speech at Temple Emmanuel in New York City in October about isolation in the Jewish community by citing Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone. Do you think the aftermath of this pandemic will result in greater isolation?
That's a really good question. I don't know who asked it, but thank you. I used that in that speech to talk about the fact that in secular American culture, the idea of being dependent is such a negative thing, right? Dependency is kind of a dirty word. And I think one of the beauties of Judaism is that dependency is Judaism. Like the whole, like built into the sort of stem cell of Judaism is the idea that we are dependent on each other. And so I think that before this crisis, certainly, but now after, I think that Judaism has amazing wisdom to offer to the broader world about the fact that we are reliant on each other, and nothing reveals that more than a virus. So I'm hopeful, but again, one of my fears is that this sort of isolation that we're having to do right now will lead to an isolation beyond the disease, but I'm hopeful that it won't. This is awesome. I'm also seeing questions like in this chat function, Jeff.
Yes.
This is cool.
Yeah, we're both trying to do several things in real time, so we ask your forbearance.
Okay, Sarah asked me, is there a ritual mitzvah prayer or tradition within Judaism that gives you extra comfort to engage with it at this time? Thank you so much, Sarah. That's a great question. It was actually my birthday yesterday, and it's weird to have birthday in quarantine. But I was talking to a Chabad rabbi I love, and the Chabadniks take birthdays very seriously. And he told me that it's my job not just to read the Psalm for the year to come. So I'm 36, so I had to read Psalm 37, but also to make public commitments for Chesed, Torah, and Mitzvot. One thing that I've talked about a lot publicly is that, and that has helped me in this through this, but the practice was sort of instated beforehand, I've relied on it, is being in more of the public eye in the past 2 years since I joined the Times, and then also being frankly addicted to the internet and to Twitter and to following the news. Getting back into Shabbat practice has really been deeply, deeply helpful for me. Shabbat guys, I recommend it to anyone who is not doing it. That's been really helpful. As I mentioned, the Telushkin book, I've been reading that. I ambitiously thought I was going to start Andrew Roberts' 1,000-page Churchill biography. Perhaps you will not be surprised to learn that I haven't even opened it. But like reading little bits of Jewish wisdom every day has been really helpful. And then I'm trying to think more seriously about more rigorously giving tzedakah this year, in a year where it's going to be harder for me to give it, right? Tzedakah is not charity. Tzedakah is justice. And, the bare minimum is 10%. And so that is one thing that I have promised to myself and publicly promised to other people, so I'm held to it, that I need to think about. And yeah.
Barry, here's a great question. The person thanks you first for the lovely lecture. And the question is, what specifically can we offer our Asian American friends and peers as they're being blamed in similar ways as Jewish people were during the Black Death?
That is such an important question. The doctor that I mentioned, that I didn't have a chance to go into this in the story today. And for those who get the physical paper, it'll be in the Sunday review section of the Times, but I did share the link in the chat function to that story. She's Asian, and she talks about the experience, as she put it, of coughing while Chinese in public, and the kind of death stares that she gets from people. And the Times has done a lot of reporting on this. As always, my answer is to show solidarity with that community. And whether or not that means going, when things are back up and running, to Chinese restaurants, frankly, and other places like that. Also looking into charities. I'm sure the ADL is doing lots of work on anti-Asian, or on bigotry against Asian Americans right now, but it's something that our community knows exactly what that is like. And frankly, we're also being blamed for this in this moment. So I think that, if anything, again, is the response to this going to be re-entrenchment and re-isolation, or is it going to be reaching out a hand? I saw, by the way, I think he's Jewish, but a journalist that I follow that I admire tweeted the other day, do I have any Asian American friends who are nervous to go to the grocery store right now? Let me do that for you. That's a small and good thing to do right now. And Linda had a really nice suggestion in the chat. We can also remember to say or sing the Misha Berach each day to cover all those who are sick and suffering. Yeah.
We're getting a lot of great questions. Here's an important one. It's been noted that authoritarian countries may be dealing with the virus better than those that are open and more democratic. Do you think this observation is going to lead to a reconsideration about our freedoms and democracy and hopefully a post-virus world?
I think this whole thing is going to lead to a reconsideration of everything. Here are some of the questions I'm thinking about that I think everyone who has their eyes open is thinking about. Will this mean a re-examination of the idea that globalization has gone too far? Will it lead to a world in which walls really do go up more? Will it lead to a return to nationalism? Will it totally change the debate on universal healthcare and make it a moot point because it will be obvious that we need a policy like that? And will it lead, as this person rightly asked, to a kind of glorification of authoritarian systems like communist China? Because lots of people will look, I personally don't believe a single number that China puts out, but they'll look to it and say, look what they were able to do. Will it lead to a world in which we agree to more surveillance and giving up of our privacy? Will it lead to a world in which big tech finally sort of seals the deal on controlling many aspects of our lives? That's just a few of the questions that I'm thinking about. I don't know the answers, but I certainly am very, very worried about what this will mean in terms of the way people consider authoritarianism and the way people maybe soften toward it.
We're getting a lot of questions about synagogues. Before the crisis, the majority of Jews in the country were unaffiliated, that is, didn't have an affiliation with a denomination or with a synagogue. Now, of course, people can't physically enter shuls, temples, but what do you think the lessons are for the role of synagogues in our community now and going forward?
One lesson that I think is profound is, in a way, we've all been reduced. It's funny, it's paradoxical, because on the one hand, we're connecting all over the world right now through this amazing technology. On the other hand, the physical world and our geography has never been, at least in my lifetime, more important. Like I'm reliant on the people next to me if I run out of something, because I can't just casually go to the grocery store. I have to like plan that out and wear gloves and wear a mask. So I think that this kind of maybe a return in a healthy way to a more shtetl mentality, not in the sense of insularity, but in the fact that like we are responsible for our neighbors. That's the thing I hope is carried forward. When it comes to synagogues, look, I got to be honest, I don't care about the future of denominations. I don't care about the future of this or that synagogue. What I care about is the future of healthy, involved Jewish communities. And if that looks in where you live like an independent minyan, great. What I think this crisis has revealed, though, is that we need physical connection. It is very hard to be isolated from other people. It is very important to get together. Personally, what I see for myself is I see myself going to more things after this. As far as synagogue affiliation, though, I'm not the best person to ask about that. That's just not my major concern.
One of the things that people are asking is, how do you evaluate the role of journalists? How have you evaluated journalism's response to the crisis? You have a particular perch in the New York Times, but you're following journalists across the country. How's your own profession done, and what can we look forward to in the future?
Well, one thing I'll say, and I include myself in this, there's been so much in the past, year, 2 years since I joined the Times that focuses on the culture war. And I have to say the debates about the culture war sort of wither in the conversation about life and death. I certainly feel that way myself, and in terms of what I'm wanting to write about and cover. I also think, it's sort of swept away a lot of the clickbaity BS, frankly, because it's just not important right now. What people want is what journalism was built for, which is information, and as clear and quickly and objectively as possible. I think it's also been interesting, frankly, to see the way that what does the news look like when someone is live streaming it from their basement? In a way, it's flattened things, I would say. People that we think of as celebrities, they're just in their basement like me and you. I think there's something kind of healthy, to be honest, about that.
And as far as
Thank you to everyone wishing me happy birthday. It's very sweet. I had a wonderful day. I've never felt more grateful, to be honest.
Barry, who are you following? Who are you reading at the current time to inform you?
Okay, so there are some people on Twitter, which is usually a cesspool, has been amazing at getting information, oftentimes not before the mainstream press, but I would say just there's some exceptional people to follow. One of them is I want to give you his exact name. My friend Nicholas Christakis, who is a professor a scientist, I believe he's also a biologist, at Yale. He's the author of a book called Blueprint: The Evolutionary Origins of a Good Society. I'm following everything he is saying about this, and I have been for a long time. I really recommend people follow him. I have been following Scott Gottlieb, as I imagine other people are. I've been following a lot of doctors and scientists, people that I didn't used to follow before. Who else? I'm following some people in Silicon Valley that I felt were who get a lot of crap for good reason, but I feel like we're ahead when it came to seeing this crisis. People like Paul Graham, for example. There's another guy I follow. I'm getting you his name literally as we're talking. Balaji Srinivasan, who's been really interesting. So people that are sort of in the business more of prediction and markets, and then certainly scientists. But if you're going to follow one person, let it be this guy Nicholas Christakis at Yale. He's been great.
I'm Jeff Herbst, president of American Jewish University. As part of our series Bayachad Together, spirited by AJU, I'm in conversation with noted columnist and author Barry Weiss on Jewish responsibility in the time of plague. Barry, we're running out of time. We have more questions than you could possibly answer. A lot of birthday wishes. Tell us about your Passover plans. What you're thinking about this year, how you're going to celebrate the holiday, how it's going to be different, maybe what it means to you more than ever.
Well, I mean, first of all, as everyone on here knows, Passover is the most celebrated Jewish holiday by a landslide. And I think the reason for that is the fact that it is the core story of Judaism. It is the story of what it means to be enslaved and the fact that we were freed. And the beauty of it, right, is that it's not just a story of our liberation, that it's inspired liberation movements, not least the abolitionists in this country, the Jewish story. So Passover, in a way, this year feels cruelly ironic, right? Because that is a story about us sort of not celebrating the plagues, but being grateful for them because it saved us. This year, we got the plagues. Usually we say, let all who are hungry come and eat. You know, we're inviting strangers into our home. This year, some of us can't even be with our own family members. So the whole story feels sort of upside down for this moment. But it's not. And one of the reasons I know it's not is for those who haven't seen it, there's an incredible picture from the Lodz ghetto of people making matzah. And there's a woman in that picture who people haven't seen it smiling at the camera. And it's just a heart-stopping picture. And you look at that and you think, they were celebrating Passover in that situation. The least we can do is celebrate it in ours. What is mine going to look like? It might be that I haven't been able to get home yet to Pittsburgh. Hopefully I'm going to. But my plan is to drive to Pittsburgh. And even if it means being 6 feet apart, maybe 10 feet apart from my dad and my mom, I hope to be home with them. And the thing that I would really recommend to people, two things. One, Tablet Magazine, which, I haven't worked there in a few years, but I sort of remain their biggest fan. They came out with a gorgeous, gorgeous new Haggadah that both contains all of the texts of the traditional Haggadah, but has some beautiful new updates. It's just called the Passover Haggadah. I recommend it to people. And today at 4:00, they're doing their own sort of Zoom webinar, whatever we're calling these things, where people can learn and come up with creative ideas about how to celebrate Passover together this year. But again, it's if you live your life as a historical Jew, and I don't really think there's any other way to be a Jew other than a Jew inside of history, that gives us the whole blueprint for this moment. And it gives us incredible perspective to think about how to update it. Who would imagine that from rabbis would be recommending to people that they use Zoom during a holiday? So we got to think about the fact that our ancestors were always updating things as a way to make them more relevant and to sort of help people through their moment. So we're writing Jewish history in the present, and I think there's something quite beautiful about that.
Barry, thank you so very much. Again, I'm Jeffrey Herbst, president of American Jewish University. We'll hope to welcome you. We will welcome you to campus on November 12th. In the meantime, please follow us on hashtag AJUtogether, and please continue to participate in our online series, Bayachad Together, spirited by AJU. Barry, thank you so very much for your time today, for the conversation, for your wisdom, and thank you for your service as journalism informing us in this time of crisis.
Thank you guys so much.